You're watching Roots TV Nigeria. Just a few days ago, a building collapsed in Lagos. A matter of fact, a school building housing over 100 people. So far, we know the fatalities are up to 10 and many more trapped in that building. Most of the fatalities were children, and that is devastating and disheartening. But this is not an isolated incident in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, in August of last year, here in Abuja, a building collapsed, 2 people died, many were trapped, and so many others injured for life. The case of building collapse in Nigeria is not new. It happens all the time. In fact, most people don't get to hear about it unless they are fatalities. And when they are fatalities, trust me, that is too huge a cost. What is causing the increasing spate of building collapse in this country? Why does it continue to happen even after fatalities are recorded from one? What are the factors responsible for them, and how do we mitigate them? What do we do to end these? These are the things we are talking about right here on Roots TV Special. My name is Gloria Oje-Emode, and to have this conversation, I have with me Engineer Peter Iwini-Jesu. He is the Vice President of the Nigerian Institutions of Structural Engineers. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. A pleasure being in your program.
Okay, so give us an idea of the frequency of building collapses in Nigeria, either in the past 1 year or in the past 5 years?
Well, the frequency in the past 5 years, I can say maybe in the tens, high tens, 70-something, 80-something, but there are no actual statistics all over the country to determine the number. And as you really said in your opening footage, it is only when we have high casualties of human loss that they actually reported. There are instances where buildings have collapsed, either during construction, no incidents are recorded, or when there are nobody occupying such structures and the building collapse. So in terms of statistics, we have recorded some in the past few years.
Interesting. Now, let's talk about why. Because, you know, Nigeria, in comparison to Ghana, for example, other African countries, the frequency at which this happens in Nigeria is far, far, far higher. Even from what I was just reading earlier, more than 50% higher than that in neighboring Ghana. So why, a country of our capacity and capability, are we experiencing increasing spates of building collapse?
It's very unfortunate, and the system which we are operating in this country, because regulations and those who are supposed to enforce development plans, the laws are quite apt. And causes of failures can also be broadened into 3 categories.
All right.
Design and detailing, materials and construction, and conversion of intended use of the structure.
I see, I see.
They are very critical. Design, there are a lot of factors you take into consideration, right from where the structure, the base, what we call the foundation. The geotechnical report and analysis and investigation on the soil to support such structures is very, very important. And the interpretation of the results is also very, very well. So as a professional, you are supposed to use all this data to be able to design so that the foundation can withstand whatever load. Then when it comes to construction phase, the specifications which as a professional you have specified, are they going to be adhered to? Such materials have to be tested. And when materials do not meet the specifications, they can also lead to failure. Then the final one is the intended use of the structure. A lot of people do conversion. You may design a structure for residential, and before you know, it's being converted to commercial. Like the case of Lagos, only God knows. We will investigate and we will come out with results. For a school to be located in such a place is very, very, I don't think, just as the governor of Lagos State said, it wasn't even approved. And don't be surprised, that structure wasn't designed for a school, because the load of a school is different from the load for residential or any other purpose. So these are basic factors that are responsible for collapse of building structure.
Interesting, because I did hear of a young lady who was talking about a building collapse and in Benin City, and she said the building was meant to be a bungalow, and somehow the owner sold it, and the person decided, you know what, I want to convert it to a 2-story building. And probably this person, based on what you said, didn't take into consideration the foundation. And that building fell, killing 3 children. That was sometime in 2000.
It happens a lot. And the problem is that there are a lot of quacks in the industries. And we keep seeing...
When you say quacks in the industry, in which part of the industry? Because it's a huge industry.
Yes, I'm talking of the built environment. You understand? In the built environment in this country, there are a lot of quacks. In the sense that there are people who have not attained the basic minimum qualifications. And you see them practicing in this building industry, which is very, very dangerous for us. And we keep saying that there are ways we can eliminate them.
Such as?
By allowing core professionals to practice in their relevant field of specialization.
I see.
You may be a quack in the sense that as a structural engineer, I cannot claim that I can do an electrical engineering job or a mechanical engineering job or an architectural job. By the time I leave my structural engineering and go to architecture, I'm already practicing as a quack in the field of architecture. So it's vice versa. So we are saying that let core professionals practice in their relevant field.
Could the cost of building materials and the desire for people to own their homes be a factor here? Because
a big major factor.
Because you're seeing, for example, you're seeing a lot of people coming up with, a typical example is here in Abuja, there are estates everywhere.
Yes,
and people want to mass produce buildings, and you see them, mixing stuff up. Now, in situations like that, who is responsible? There should be a body responsible for regulating that. Who is it? And why don't they do that?
There are bodies. That's why I said at the beginning that the laws and the regulations and the regulators, they are all there. But another thing which may be a hindrance is the capacity. Do they have the personnel to know? Because like Abuja, which you mentioned, there's the Agency of Development Control Office under the Abuja Management Council, you understand? They are supposed to give approval and monitor all these projects, you understand? But you discover that they may be overwhelmed. And that's why we are telling them, government agencies can partner with professional institutions. These professional institutions, they regulate their members. They regulate the firms, the individuals who are corporate members of their institution. You can partner with them. They can provide services for you. After all, you charge clients for services for approval of their drawings. You can find a way of being so that these people can augment and also assist you in checking the design, in monitoring the construction, and even after the building is being occupied, with time, we should carry out periodically integrity tests, like the one that happened in Lagos. Maybe that building was standing for years. It may have been under stress. Maybe the foundation was already being stressed in the sense that we even learned that it was within an area for a reclaimed land, you understand? And with time, periodically, we should carry out integrity tests of buildings.
A lot of times when they talk buildings for demolition, that happens a lot, especially in that region in Lagos. Yes, Itafaji. A lot of buildings are marked for demolition. And I can remember one time here in Abuja when, the minister at the time, El Rufai, was tagged a bad person for wanting to demolish a lot of buildings. Now, technically, a lot of people were against that. And people would go to certain lengths, like exchanging, one or two things, bribing the officials to ensure that their buildings are not demolished. And then at the end of the day, when these buildings keep standing, they turn into death traps. What do you do in situations like that to ensure that buildings that are tagged for demolition, first of all, buildings that are supposed to be demolished are tagged for demolition, and then these buildings are appropriately demolished in such a way that even the people who own these buildings are compensated, and then what is appropriate is done?
I think the idea of compensation may help in the sense that if a building is EMR for demolition, people who are already living there, and when officials come, as you rightly say, maybe the exchange of gratification and the rest, and they are left behind. But what is very necessary is that once a building is EMR for demolition, and you go through your records, that ab initio, that building was approved for it to be executed and standing. Of course, they should be compensated before they are demolished. But if, for instance, there was no approval and it was done illegally, you will have no pain or plan to compensate anybody. It goes.
Okay, so you're trying to tell me if you build if you site a building without approval and it's earmarked for demolition, you don't get any compensation.
You don't get any compensation. Because what El Rufai was doing when he was minister here was that most of those buildings were standing on right of ways, either sewer lines, water lines, or road or railway, and people were they were giving them temporary allocation. And he challenged them that anybody he has demolished his structure and he has a permanent approval, he was ready to pay compensation. But none of them could come forward.
Let's talk about people who live in uncompleted buildings. That's a big issue here in Nigeria.
It is very illegal. Very illegal to live in an uncompleted building. It's very, very illegal. It's not even safe for occupation, but you even discover that many of them, they will say they are workers on that site. And you discover that these buildings have been abandoned for years. You understand? And we are telling them that if they have been abandoned, people now use them as refuge. Yes, I was once a worker here and the rest. And before you go back to start work, like the one that happened in Jabi in August, that was the case. You understand? That building was abandoned for years, only for them to come back without carrying out the necessary integrity test, and they started construction.
But see, here's a big situation, because a lot of people who live in these uncompleted buildings are people who are trying to get accommodation, but they can't find it. Mostly the less privileged in the society. That also, you know, creates another, lets us see a different facet of this conversation. Because you tell these people to go away, they ask you, where do we live? So how does government marry a situation where you really need, these people need shelter, but you also need to protect these people who need shelter? It's complex.
I agree with you that it's complex, and government need to put in place policies, you understand? There's a mass housing program which is being embarked by the present administration. Okay. You understand? Whether it is affordable for these categories of people is another. But it's no excuse, just the fact that you don't have accommodation, you risk your life to stay in an uncompleted building. We don't have that as an excuse, but they can be monitored. And we try as much as possible to ensure that we enforce the existing laws.
Before we end our conversation, what should be the first line of action when a building collapses, whether there are people in it or not? Okay, let's talk about the situations where there aren't occupants, and then situations like what happened in Lagos, because it feels, I'm not just talking about emergency response system, but what should people around maybe trying to help, what should be the first things on their minds, considering this is a structure?
This is what they call the Nigerian fault, because our resilient nature and our love for how each other, like the one that happened, you see that the way people rushed here to see what aspect of rescue they come before the mechanical gadgets came in, you can show that it is really there. But most of these structures that collapses, it's always difficult to have access because of the structural elements that have collapsed, either the walls, the columns, the beams, and the rest. And with your human hands, you cannot. You cannot. So, and access to a site where we have had collapses is also a difficult situation. You understand? And you have to clear the ways. And the way people rush is always very dangerous, because there are tendencies whereby if a building gives way, maybe there are still other areas, because anything above has fallen. Maybe there are still levels that have not. It can still be dangerous. And by the time people troop in with all the human weight and the rest, it almost happened in the one of Jabi, but until they have to condole of the area. You understand? Because we have to make sure that the access, the removals of the debris are done until they get to ground zero.
So you're saying that even as people rush in, they could also create greater hazard for the people who are trapped and for themselves?
Yes, as well. It's very...
Wow, there's a lot of education to be done here.
A lot.
A big thank you to you, Engineer Igbini Jesu, for taking our time to talk to us right here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Gloria.
Please, we would like you to give us your comments on this situation on the comment section of this video, and continue to give us information about the situation, considering that if there are buildings around your area that need attention, or there are people who are staying in uncompleted buildings, they need to be safe, and these things need to be flagged. Isn't it better that they're homeless than they are dead? All right, you're still watching Roots TV Nigeria. I'm Gloria Oji Emode.